Hey guys, it's Miss Labber. I hope you're having a nice spring break. I took last week off, but I'm back. Continuing with Flowers for Algernon, we're on page 96. I believe we left off when Gimpy, he found out that Gimpy was stealing. So he was conflicted about what to do about it. So, May 15th. My studies are going well. The university library is my second home now. They've had to get me a private room because it takes me only a second to absorb the printed page, and curious students invariably gather around me as I flip through my books. So this means that he looks at a page and it's absorbed. Looks at a page, it's absorbed. So he's learning at an incredibly impressive rate, and it's freaking people out around him. So he has to have a private room just to study because people can't understand why he's flipping through pages like that. So he has now, it's called a photographic memory. You just look and it's all in your brain. Pretty crazy. My most absorbing interests at the present time are etymologies of ancient languages, the newer works on the calculus of variations, and Hindu history. It's amazing the way things, apparently disconnected, hang together. I've moved up to another plateau, and now the streams of the various disciplines seem to be closer to each other, as if they flow from a single source. Strange how when I'm in the college cafeteria and hear the students arguing about history or politics or religion, it all seems so childish. I find no pleasure in discussing ideas anymore on such an elementary level. People resent being shown that they don't approach the complexities of the problem. They don't know what exists beyond the surface ripples. It's just as bad on a higher level, and I've given up any attempt to discuss these things with the professors at Beekman. Bert introduced me to an economics professor at the faculty cafeteria, one well known for his work on the economic factors affecting interest rates. I had long wanted to talk to an economist about some of the ideas I had come across in my reading. The moral aspects of the military blockade as a weapon in times of peace has been bothering me. I asked him what he thought of the suggestion by some senators that we begin using such tactics as blacklisting and reinforcement of the Navicert controls that had been used in World Wars I and II against some of the smaller nations which now oppose us. He listened quietly, staring off into space, and I assumed he was collecting his thoughts for an answer. But a few minutes later, he cleared his throat and shook his head. That, he explained apologetically, was outside his area of specialization. His interest was in interest rates, and he hadn't given military economics much thought. He suggested I see Dr. Wessey, who once did a paper on World War trade agreements during World War II. He might be able to help me. Before I could say anything else, he grabbed my hand and shook it. He had been glad to meet me, but there were some notes he had to assemble for a lecture, and then he was gone. The same thing happened when I tried to discuss Chaucer with an American literature specialist, questioned an Orientalist about the Trobriand Islanders, and tried to focus on the problems of automation-caused unemployment with a social psychologist who specialized in public opinion polls on adolescent behavior. They would always find excuses to slip away, afraid to reveal the narrowness of their knowledge. How different they seemed to me now, and how foolish I was ever to have thought that professors were intellectual giants. They're people, and afraid of the rest of the world will find out. And Alice is a person too, a woman, not a goddess. I'm taking her to the concert tomorrow night. Whoa. That was even hard for me to read because his intellect is so far above mine now that I don't even understand what he's talking about half the time. So he is finding interest in all these different subjects, and he's trying to talk to college professors about them. But the college professors cannot keep up with his intellect. They can't hold a conversation because he's too intelligent. And so now he is looking at these people, oh, they're not these superheroes that he thought they were. They're just regular people. And now he is above them. So if he's smarter than the college professors, who was he able to talk to about all of these interests he has? May 17. Almost morning and I can't fall asleep. I've got to understand what happened to me last night at the concert. The evening started out well enough. The mall at Central Park had filled up early, and Alice and I had to pick our way among the couples stretched out on the grass. Finally, far back from the path, we found an unused tree where, out of the range of lamplight, the only evidence of other couples was the protesting female laughter and the glow of lit cigarettes. "This will be fine," she said. "No reason to be right on top of the orchestra." "What's that they're playing now?" I asked. Debussy's La Mer. Do you like it? I settled down beside her. I don't know much about this kind of music. I have to think about it. Don't think about it, she whispered. Feel it. Let it sweep over you like the sea without trying to understand. She lay back on the grass and turned her face in the direction of the music. I had no way of knowing what she expected of me. This was far from the clear lines of problem solving and the systematic acquisition of knowledge. I kept telling myself that the sweating palms, the tightness in my chest, the desire to put my arms around her were merely biochemical reactions. I even traced the pattern of stimulus and reaction that caused my nervousness and excitement. Yet everything was fuzzy and uncertain. Should I put my arm around her or not? Was she waiting for me to do it? Would she get angry? I could tell I was still behaving like an adolescent, and it angered me. Here, I choked. Why don't you make yourself more comfortable? Rest on my shoulder. She let me put my arm around her, but she didn't look at me. She seemed to be too absorbed in the music to realize what I was doing. Did she want me to hold her that way, or was she merely tolerating it? As I slipped my arm down to her waist, I felt her tremble, but she was still staring in the direction of the orchestra. She was pretending to be concentrating on the music so that she wouldn't have to respond to me. She didn't want to know what was happening. As long as she looked away and listened, she could pretend that my closeness, my arms around her, were without her knowledge or consent. She wanted me to make love to her body while she kept her mind on higher things. I reached over roughly and turned her chin. Why don't you look at me? Are you pretending I don't exist? No, Charlie, she whispered. I'm pretending I don't exist. When I touched her shoulder, she stiffened and trembled, but I pulled her toward me. Then it happened. It started as a hollow buzzing in my ears, an electric saw, far away. Then the cold, arms and legs prickly and fingers numbing. Suddenly I had the feeling I was being watched. A sharp switch in perception. I saw, from some point in the darkness behind a tree, the two of us lying in each other's arms. I looked up to see a boy of 15 or 16 crouching nearby. Hey, I shouted. As he stood up, I saw his trousers were open and he was exposed. What's the matter? She gasped. I jumped up and he vanished into the darkness. Did you see him? No, she said, smoothing her skirt nervously. I didn't see anyone. Standing right there, watching us, close enough to touch you. Charlie, where are you going? He couldn't have gotten very far. Leave him alone, Charlie, it doesn't matter. But it mattered to me. I ran into the darkness, stumbling over startled couples, but there was no way to tell where he had gone. The more I thought about him, the worse became the queasy feeling that comes before the fainting. Lost and alone in a great wilderness. And then I caught hold of myself and found my way back to where Alice was sitting. Did you find him? No, but he was there. I saw him. She looked at me strangely. Are you all right? I will be. In a minute. Just that damn buzzing in my ears. Maybe we better go. All the way back to her apartment, it was on my mind that the boy had been crouching there in the darkness, and for 1 second I had caught a glimpse of what he was seeing. The two of us lying in each other's arms. Would you like to come in? I could make some coffee. I wanted to, but something warned me against it. Better not. I've got a lot of work to do tonight. Charlie, is it something I said or did? Of course not. Just that kid watching us upset me. She was standing close to me, waiting for me to kiss her. I put my arm around her, but it happened again. If I didn't get away quickly, I would pass out. Charlie, you look sick. Did you see him, Alice? The truth. She shook her head. No, it was too dark, but I'm sure. I've got to go. I'll call you. And before she could stop me, I pulled away. I had to get out of that building before everything caved in. Thinking about it now, I'm certain it was a hallucination. Dr. Strauss feels that emotionally, I'm still in that adolescent state where being close to a woman or thinking of sex sets off anxiety, panic, even hallucinations. He feels that my rapid intellectual development has deceived me into thinking I could live a normal emotional life. But I've got to accept the fact that the fears and blocks triggered in these sexual situations reveal that I'm still an adolescent, sexually retarded. I guess he means I'm not ready for a relationship with a woman like Alice Kinnian. Not yet. So, Now we're getting to see exactly what it means by emotionally adolescent. So his intelligence is way up here, but when it comes to being intimate with a woman, he's still down here like a teenager. And so when he was near her, he was having these physical reactions, hands sweating, he was getting butterflies in his stomach, which are all very normal reactions, but he's so intellectual and he didn't understand what they were, and he was trying to figure it out scientifically what was happening to his body, when really it was emotional what was happening to his body. So Dr. Strauss is not believing that he can have an emotional relationship right now, but Charlie is going to be determined. He wants to have a relationship. May 20. I've been fired from my job at the bakery. I know it was foolish of me to hang on to the past, but there was something about the place with its white brick walls, browned by oven heat. It was home to me. What did I do to make them hate me so? I can't blame Donner. He's got to think of his business and the other employees. And yet, he's been closer to me than a father. He called me into his office, cleared the statements and bills off the solitary chair beside his roll-top desk, and without looking up at me, he said, I've been meaning to talk to you. Now is as good a time as any. It seems foolish now, but I sat there staring at him, short, chubby, with the ragged light brown mustache comically drooping over his upper lip. It was as if both of me, the old Charlie and the new, were sitting on that chair, frightened at what old Mr. Donner was going to say. Charlie, your Uncle Herman was a good friend of mine. I kept my promise to him to keep you on the job, good times and bad, so that you didn't ever want for $1 in your pocket and a place to lay your head without being put away in that home. The bakery is my home, and I treated you like my own son who gave up his life for his country. And when Herman died, how old were you? 17? More like a 6-year-old boy. I swore to myself. I said, Arthur Donner, as long as you got a bakery and a business over your head, you're going to look after Charlie. He is going to have a place to work, a bed to sleep in, and bread in his mouth. When they committed you to that Warren place, I told them how you would work for me and I would take care of you. You didn't spend even one night in that place. I got you a room and I looked after you. Now, have I kept that solemn promise? I nodded, but I could see by the way he was folding and unfolding his bills that he was having trouble. And as much as I didn't want to know, I knew. I've tried my best to do a good job. I've worked hard. I know, Charlie. Nothing's wrong with your work, but something happened to you, and I don't understand what it means. Not only me, everyone has been talking about it. I've had them in here a dozen times in the last few weeks. They're all upset. Charlie, I got to let you go. I tried to stop him, but he shook his head. There was a delegation in to see me last night. Charlie, I got my business to hold together. He was staring at his hands, turning the paper over and over as if he hoped to find something on it that was not there before. I'm sorry, Charlie, but where will I go? He peered up at me for the first time since we'd walked into his cubbyhole office. You know as well as I do that you don't need to work here anymore. Mr. Donner, I've never worked anywhere else. Let's face it, you're not the Charlie that came in here 17 years ago. Not even the same Charlie of 4 months ago. You haven't talked about it? It's your own affair. Maybe a miracle of some kind. Who knows? But you've changed into a very smart young man. And operating the dough mixer and delivering packages is no work for a smart young man. He was right, of course, but something inside me wanted to make him change his mind. You've got to let me stay, Mr. Donner. Give me another chance. You said yourself that you promised Uncle Herman I would have a job here for as long as I needed it. Well, I still need it, Mr. Donner. So try to think. Obviously, Charlie is too intelligent for this job. He could be doing much more impressive things. And he could be spending this time studying. Why do you think Charlie really wants to stay at the bakery? What is it about the bakery that is important to him or comforting to him? Why does he want to stay there, especially when he was treated poorly by his coworkers? Take a minute, think about it. Okay. You don't, Charlie. If you did, then I'd tell them I don't care about their delegations and their petitions, and I'd stick up for you against all of them. But as it is now, they're all scared to death of you. I gotta think of my own family too. What if they change their minds? Let me try to convince them. What if they change their minds? Sorry, this is Charlie speaking. What if they change their minds? Let me try to convince them. I was making it harder for him than he expected. I knew I should stop, but I couldn't control myself. I'll make them understand, I pleaded. All right, he sighed finally. Go ahead, try, but you're only going to hurt yourself. As I came out of his office, Frank Riley and Joe Carp walked by me, and I knew what he had said was true. Having me around to look at was too much for them. I made them all uncomfortable. Frank had just picked up a tray of rolls, and both he and Joe turned when I called. Look, Charlie, I'm busy. Maybe later. No, I insisted. Now, right now, both of you have been avoiding me. Why? Frank, the fast talker, the ladies' man, the arranger, studied me for a moment and then set the tray down on the table. Why? I'll tell you why. Because all of a sudden you're a big shot, a know-it-all, a brain. Now you're a regular whiz kid, an egghead, always with a book, always with all the answers. Well, I'll tell you something. You think you're better than the rest of us here? Okay, go someplace else. But what did I do to you? What did he do? Hear that, Joe? I'll tell you what you did, Mr. Gordon. You come pushing in here with your ideas and suggestions and make the rest of us all look like a bunch of dopes. But I'll tell you something. To me, you're still a moron. Maybe I don't understand some of them big words or the names of the books, but I'm as good as you are. Better even. Yeah, Joe nodded, turning to emphasize the point to Gimpy, who had just come up behind him. I'm not asking you to be my friends, I said, or have anything to do with me. Just let me keep my job. Mr. Donner says it's up to you. Gimpy stared at me and then shook his head in disgust. You got a nerve, he shouted. You can go to hell. Then he turned and limped off heavily. And so it went. Most of them felt the way Joe and Frank and Gimpy did. It had been all right as long as they could laugh at me and appear clever at my expense, but now they were feeling inferior to the moron. I began to see that my astonishing growth I had made them shrink and emphasize their inadequacies. I had betrayed them, and they hated me for it. Fanny Burden was the only one who didn't think I should be forced to leave, and despite the pressure and threats, she had been the only one not to sign the petition. Which don't mean to say, she remarked, that I don't think there's something mighty strange about you, Charlie. The way you've changed. I don't know. You used to be a good, dependable man. Ordinary. Not too bright, maybe, but honest. And who knows what you'd done to get yourself so smart all of a sudden. Like everybody's been saying, it ain't right. But what's wrong with a person wanting to be more intelligent, to acquire knowledge, and understand himself and the world? If you'd read your Bible, Charlie, you know that it's not meant for man to know more than was given to him to know by the Lord in the first place. The fruit of that tree was forbidden to man. Charlie, if you'd done anything you wasn't supposed to do, like with the devil or something, maybe it ain't too late to get out of it. Maybe you could go back to being the good, simple man you was before. There's no going back, Fanny. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm like a man born blind who has been given a chance to see the light. That can't be sinful. Soon there'll be millions like me all over the world. Science can do it, Fanny. She stared down at the bride and groom on the wedding cake she was decorating, and I could see her lips barely move as she whispered. It was evil when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. It was evil when they saw they was naked and learned about lust and shame. And they was driven out of paradise, and the gates was closed to them. If not for that, none of us would have to grow old and be sick and die. There was nothing more to say, to her or to the rest of them. None of them would look into my eyes. I can still feel the hostility. Before they had laughed at me, despising me for my ignorance and dullness. Now they hated me for my knowledge and understanding. Why? What in God's name did they want of me? This intelligence has driven a wedge between me and all the people I knew and loved. It driven me out of the bakery. Now I'm more alone than ever. I wonder what would happen if they put Algernon back in the big cage with some of the other mice. Would they turn against him? Okay, So I'll stop that for today. These are the things I talked about at the beginning of the book, that once you gain all this intelligence, you might look at your life and realize that you had it okay. He had friends, he had people who cared about him, as so he thought. And now he's realizing he doesn't really have much of anybody, and he's losing his job at the bakery. Okay? So I'll end that for today. Bye.